Hi folks, it's Chris here, Calc from Novation, and I'm here with our Italian distributors at the Soundmit show here in Turin. Wonderful, wonderful Turin. And here we are at the MIDIware booth, and I have here with me the fantastic Summit Synthesizer. This is our latest flagship instrument, and I'd love to talk to you a little bit about it, about how it is all structured, and just do a very quick demo. 16 voice polysynth with a lot of power inside. So let's dive right in and I'll tell you a little bit about how this synth is working. So here we have the Summit, of course. Summit is effectively taking the Peak synthesizer engine that we created a couple of years ago and actually cramming two of those engines directly into the keyboard here. So we have a 61 note full-size key bed. We have a whole load of, well, I call it real estate, but a whole load of control panel at the top here, which lets me have instant access over the sound. And I also have 16 huge voices. And here we've got a single patch, and I'm using this, you can see the voice allocation here. So we can use up to 16 voices, and we can do that to either play huge, great big chords, or I can go into my unison mode here and turn on 8 voice unison. So we've got a lot of scope for creating those really huge sounds. Now, this is in the single mode. Another great feature that we have in the Summit is the fact that we have a single mode for controlling a single patch with all 16 voices, or I can go into a multi-mode, and then I can choose, for example, here we go for Instant Darkroom. This is one of the patches I did, and now I actually have 2 separate engines in here. So this is a drum part that was created out of some noise and LFOs and sine waves giving us kick drums and that sort of thing. And then if I go to part B here, I've got this on a split point, and I think the split point is around about here. So if I play here, you might need some big speakers for this. Let's go up. So basically we can split the instrument into 2 distinct synthesizers. This is managed all down here, so I have part A and part B. So I can have very quick and easy instant access to both of the synth layers, but also if I press them together, I'll go into both modes. So now the filter is going to control the filter for both of those preset sounds. We also have this multi-mode here, and I can choose something like a layer, and in a layer I'm going to play 2 different parts together. Again, another kind of strange, unusual patch that's using a whole load of kind of arpeggiation and rhythmic stuff. But you can see here I'm playing both voices at the same time. Now, let's just stop those. Now if I go to the dual mode, now if I go to part A, I'm just going to get the single sound here. And if I go to part B, got a kind of a crazy effect over the delays. So when you go back to the layer mode, you can actually stick both of them on top of each other and create some very complex and interesting patches using this multi-timbral mode. So the real advantage to the Summit is that we have, we've got this wonderful 16 voice powerhouse of a synthesizer, but that can also then be split into 2 separate synthesizers. I can stack them on top of each other. I can use a split point to control them separately on the keyboard, or if I go to dual mode, they are 2 completely independent synthesizers, and then can both receive channels on, MIDI information on different MIDI channels. So that's kind of one of the key things that we have on the Summit, the fact it's this bi-timbral system with all 16 voices. But some other interesting things, really, I would say, down to the top panel control here. So I'm going to initialize the patch, and here I'm just going to move to a whole load of sine waves, because Peak, for example, has FM synthesis involved, as does the Summit. But the great thing about the Summit is we actually have the controls for FM directly here on the top panel. So here we have a nice just sine wave, and then now I just bring in the FM. I'm instantly getting FM from oscillator 3 going into oscillator 1. Now this particular control can be a manual control to set a particular volume, a particular level, or it can also be at the same time a control to take modulation envelope 2, this envelope here, and apply some of that to the signal. And maybe alongside that I want to use some of LFO2 as well, and I'll bring some of that in. So what we have here is a three-way control that allows you to control three different things simultaneously. Very similar to the shape control that we have for the oscillators here as well. Okay, so with the top panel here, we were able to expose these FM controls. Additional things that we've got as well are the arpeggiator controls. On peak, we have an arpeggiator menu that we can access these things, but here they're accessible from the top panel as well. Now, when the Peak received its 1.2 update around about a year ago, we actually added a couple of extra LFOs to the Peak synthesizer engine. Of course, when designing Summit, we had the space to expose those as well. So here we've got global LFO 3 and 4 available for me to control. I can sync, I can choose the type here, choose between LFO 3 and 4 directly on the instrument. Let's initialize the sound again, and I'll show you one of my favorite things, and this is the envelope looping. Now again, this arrived for the Peak 1.2 firmware update, but on the Summit we actually have a dedicated button that can turn that on and off, and this is one of my favorite things on the instrument. So here I've got a nice little, let's go to, open the filter. You can hear now this loop is just basically going round and round. As I increase the decay, I can go into really super fast, basically audio rates, and we've got essentially a programmable LFO with this. Now of course it's not only just stuck to the amp envelope, I can go to the mod envelope as well. So let's go to the loop, the mod envelope 1, bring the filter down, and then we've got a kind of a crazy little clicky sound from the filter as well. But if I open that up, and one of the really nice things about this is because we've got an envelope per voice, we have 3 envelopes per voice, we can start to use this in a latched mode to kind of give interesting different rhythms. So let's open that up a bit, add a bit of reverb. Let's bring in the third oscillator down an octave. And we've got a patch very quickly. That's one of the things I must say about the Summit Synth. So easy to dial in a patch super quickly. If you know a little bit of how a synthesizer is constructed with the oscillators, filter and modulation, you'll feel instantly at home, seriously, on this device. So let's initialize the patch again, and I just want to very quickly talk about the filter. This is the key difference between the Peak engine and the Summit engine. This actually is a different circuit and is actually doing some very interesting things as well. Now the actual filter itself is essentially the same as the Peak, apart from we have low pass, band pass, high pass, and then we have a fourth option, here, which is labelled dual. And what that does is it splits the filter into 2 separate filter sections. So normally we have 24 and 12 dB for low pass, band pass, high pass. So I can choose whether I want a more aggressive 24 dB per octave or 12 dB per octave filter slope. When I go to dual, what's happening is we're taking 2 12 dB filters, which in series give us our 24 dB filter, and we're splitting those into 2 separate discrete filters. When I go into the dual mode, you'll see on the menu that we immediately go to the voice page, and I'm now given filter shape dual, low pass with an arrow indicating series into high pass. I can now use this filter in a dual method. When I see an arrow like that, I have basically a series. So low pass into high pass effectively is going to be like a band pass, I guess. But I can change the separation of these filters. Now when you see a little plus between the two filter types, here we go, I'll go low pass into low pass. This is now in parallel. And we have 9 new filter types in here to work with. They're all purely analog, by the way. All of this section of the synthesizer is analog. And this allows me now, with a little bit of resonance, to kind of get into the world of format filtering. And you can actually hear the two filters working there as well. And again, I can separate that to get a slightly different flavour and move the cut-off points of both filters at the same time. So really that's the big difference in terms of the sound engine between the Summit and the Peak. Pretty much everything else is the same, except of course we have 2 of everything. And that includes 2 of the effects circuits, 2 of the synthesizers, and even 2 arpeggiators, independent as well. So combining all of these things together can give you a very powerful instrument. Now the last thing I'll very quickly mention is the fact that we have lots of connectivity on the back here as well. So we're coming out to the camera here just using outputs 1 and 2. But if I was working in a live sort of situation, or maybe wanted to, you know, send out synth part B to a different sort of system, I could very easily use the auxiliary outputs and allocate that here in my output routing page. So here we can see part A is coming out of the main, part B is coming out of the main, but I can choose for it to be coming out of the auxiliary 3 and 4 if I want instead. I also have 2 audio inputs, and again this is a really neat feature because this allows you to inject any audio signal, any sampling, any loops, anything like that that you want. You can inject that directly in, and that can come in before the filter, so you can process that using the filter and then into the effects here, or you can come out after the filter, just go directly into the effects and use Summit essentially like a very powerful effects processor as well. So that's a quick look through the Summit. It's a huge instrument. I could literally stand here and talk to you for about 2 hours about what this thing is capable of doing. But yeah, this is Summit. It's going to be out in stores literally in the next couple of weeks. As I say, we're at the beginning of November here in Soundmit, and you'll start to see this in stores in the next couple of weeks. So if you get an opportunity, go to your local dealers and just go and try this out because it's a huge instrument and it's a lot of fun.